designed to encourage, empower, and educate real estate professionals by sharing best practices from business leaders that are proven winners. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and this is Calibrate Real Estate. Broadcasting from the Mile High City, thank you for tuning in to the Calibrate Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati. Our esteemed guest is from Gibson Sotheby's. His name is Ryan Glass, and he's a fellow 30 under 30, was part of class of 2017. Ryan and I have hung out before in Boston, which is where he's from. He specializes in South End, Back Bay, and South Boston. Ryan, say hello to our podcast audience.
Hey, everyone. How's it going today?
We're super excited to interview you. So 30 under 30s always have a story, and you had shared with me that the 30 under 30 piece of Realtor Magazine, they picked up on this lighthouses concept. And I think there's a really important story for a lot of our listeners, a lot of the people watching on YouTube. I think that you've got a story that is really, really important to share for people that are maybe have new beginnings, maybe are in a position where they have been doing one thing for a while and they are comfortable in that thing. And it could be that they're on the administrative side of the real estate industry, or they're working in another industry and they've always loved real estate, but they're maybe afraid to make what a lot of people call that leap or that jump. Let's talk about the story that Realtor Magazine picked up with lighthouses and just what you were doing before you got into real estate. And obviously you've had some meteoric success being recognized by 30 under 30, and the Realtor Magazine piece there is a huge deal. But let's talk about that beginning for you.
Sure, absolutely. So one of the things I used to do prior to real estate is I worked for the federal government. I worked for the General Services Administration, which is the largest owner of public real estate. And one of the most fun things I got to do was every year they had surplus property that they would sell for the federal government. And I used to help sell lighthouses for the Coast Guard. So I would do all the press, the communications, and help organize the media tours and help with advertising and things like that. And I had that job for 7 years, and I was petrified to give it up. It was very secure, cushy benefits, great pay, especially for my age at the time. And everyone thought I was crazy to want to do real estate. And I had started real estate and this job at the exact same time, doing real estate part-time. So my heart was always truly in real estate. And I just eventually had to cut the cord and just take the plunge, which was the most horrifying thing I ever did, but also one of the best decisions I've ever made.
I love that, because we all make sacrifices in the real estate industry. Some of them, like myself, I was starting really, really young in my early 20s, right after college, and started on the administrative side of the business because I really couldn't afford to go out there and be on a commission only type of situation. I needed a salary getting out of college with some student loans and just trying to get, myself bootstrapped up. My parents were very supportive from a love standpoint, but didn't have a whole lot of financial support. And so I think that that's a common theme. There's a lot of people who say, look, I can see that there's going to be maybe an ability to earn some great income and then even generate some wealth over time. But that first year, I think a lot of people look at it like this is going to be a really, really scary stretch here. And so after that transition of selling lighthouses for the Coast Guard and for the federal government, you went into being a luxury realtor, and you shared with me that you were broke. And what was that like, getting your first listing? And what did you do to position yourself with the right people? Because I think this is an important message for those who are trying to, and leverage is a word that's used a lot, but I would say connect, network with the right people that can connect you to your end clients. So let's talk about that start as you're in real estate and you're broke and you're trying to figure things out.
Sure, absolutely. So being with a brand like Sotheby's, there was just so many successful agents that I admired and looked up to. And one thing I did almost immediately is I just started asking people to lunch. I just wanted to get to know the top agents. I wanted to hear how they grew their business. And I really just also, coming from a 9-to-5, wanted to be friends with my coworkers. And that's sort of hard to do in real estate when no one's at the office at the same time. So that was the first thing I really was spending my time. And then second, I was making a point always to brand myself as a luxury realtor just from the beginning, even when I didn't have high-end sales to promote. Now I pretty much just promote my sales, which generates to more sales and to referrals. But at the time, I was tapping into the luxury brand Sotheby's and using their content to blog about. I'd blog about what was for auction at the Sotheby's auction house. I would blog about amazing properties throughout the world by different Sotheby's agents. And I would just share, like the YouTube video that they had on the Sotheby's channel, or photos of the properties. And I was doing all of this at the same time as purposely making a point to network with only, financial planners, wealth managers, CPAs, estate attorneys, pretty much anyone who handles someone's finances. And I really wanted, the image I was portraying in person to then be matched online. That if they were to research me further, if they had a potential client, that my online reputation looked similar to what I was promoting in person, and that I looked reputable to whoever they might be referring me to. And so I was broke as a joke my first 6 months, and I was doing really well, but everything was going right back out. I just hadn't planned properly for my transition financially. And I got probably about within 6 months of being full time, I got an amazing $5 million listing opportunity from a wealth manager that I had been networking with. And he called me, out of the blue. He's like, "Look, I know you don't sell at this price point, but I'm sure there's someone at your office you can bring this to." And even then, having done all those lunches paid off huge, because I knew the exact agent to contact who worked in that market, who had the name, who had the reputation for us to get the listing. And so just, it paid off just having even those connections. And then it was pretty crazy within my first 6 months getting a $5 million listing, but also having no money to market it, which is the beauty of a partner for sure, to help with that, the expenses.
Well, I love the idea that you've got a mentor, someone that's already been there, done that can show you the way, but you also were just as much involved in procuring the listing because you had the connection. And I think it's really smart that you networked with a lot of intentionality to people that you knew would connect you to your eventual clientele. And I think that for a lot of agents that are starting, and I've got a class of, we hate to call them rookies. They're really associate brokers. They're people who are new to the business or are trying to maybe pivot or reposition their business from another company that they were at. And so this class of 5, we constantly are talking about this. How do we get new listings? And some of them, do drop-bys and check in with friends and work their sphere of influence. Some of them make cold calls to real estate investors or developers. And you got to think about the fact that there are some people in our industry, and a lot of times I've said I would encourage people to talk to insurance agents too, that are constantly talking to a large group of people that are targeted directly at who you want to talk to as well. And if you can get really in with those folks, and if you can prove, especially when you get that opportunity, that you can succeed, the referrals will then just unlock and really become critical. I had a conversation with Ivan Estrada from Los Angeles, and Ivan does a lot of luxury work, and he had a very similar story where he was a struggling real estate agent. He had grown up in the acting field and drama. And so, was very well polished, but was also not as affluent as some of his buddies that went to USC. And he was kind of in that same spot that you were sharing. And he ended up getting, through an IDX feed, a phone call from basically someone that was working with a Saudi investor. And one of his first deals he sold was a $29 million house in LA. Yeah. I mean, he just like, what? But the point was he was in proximity to some really important people. He was working the financial advisors. He was already, it was basically like a floor call that someone just called into the office. He was in the right office. He was around the right people. And then he was willing and available to go after it. So I think for a lot of new agents, it's critical. And I think you would agree that all it takes is just that one deal. And the hardest thing is finding that one deal. And then everything becomes a little bit easier after you've got that first transaction under your belt.
Oh, absolutely. And I think too, just even knowing that, there's not a weakness to partner with someone. I think that's the big mistake a lot of new agents make too, is they don't want to give up half the commission. But I'm always looking at it, especially from a marketing standpoint, especially every time I have a new opportunity that's beyond what I've done before. I know what business I can generate from landing that opportunity, from the marketing, from pushing it out there. Business creates business. So I think even if you have to give up half your commission, think of the commission you can make simply from leveraging that opportunity and having it on your resume. And then next time not needing someone to partner because you have something like that under your belt.
Yeah, I think that was a very mature decision that you made when that financial advisor called, and you didn't, I caught that you didn't say like, oh, well, I can do it on my own. I'll figure it out. You were like, no, I'm going right to the guy that I know that's the specialist. I'm not going to mess this up. I'm not going to give this guy any doubt that he's made the wrong decision because that's the financial advisor. This is a big test. And if you stumble in that first opportunity, you're probably never getting a referral from that guy again. And so I think it's like, we're going to do this well. And you could tell maybe with the wink of an eye that he was like, hey, I know this is not something that you necessarily can do on your own, but bring someone in and we'll make this deal happen. And I thought that was a very cool story. So now a lot of that is obvious for the seasoned agent. So let's talk to seasoned agents about online branding. That was something that you shared with me, that something that you've really become an expert at. That also includes social media. But what do you do? What is your process? What are your thoughts about online branding and how you differentiate yourself, or how you really carve a niche for yourself online?
Sure, sure. So our company CEO, I was meeting with weekly when I first went full time. And one thing she said that I've never forgotten is experts do two things: they speak and they write. And that really registered with me. And so that really always made me think about the content I was putting out there and how can I promote myself as an expert. So now, in addition to just plugging my sales, I still think sales are probably your best credibility, especially with the luxury market. And what I find with the luxury market, plugging those sales makes it even easier to get the low end sales. They go, oh, if you can sell a $2 million home, you can sell my house, no problem. So, so in addition to sales, though, I'm constantly looking for opportunities for speaking engagements or anything I can maybe possibly write about. So, for example, one thing I do is I hit all the Sotheby's affiliate offices doing a social media presentation, and I have them take a photo and I post about it. And there's a message there. The message is that I'm an expert. This is why you should be hiring me. Sotheby's is having me go across all the different offices to speak to their agents. What does that say about me as a professional? It means I'm successful. They're not going to let someone do that otherwise. And I knew my plan was working when I was just popped into my local bar, and the bartender who I'm Facebook friends with was like, "You're everywhere. You're killing it. I can't believe you were just in New York doing a presentation." She has no idea I'm asking to present, that I'm like banging down doors trying to get into as many opportunities as I can get. But it's the perception, and I've noticed that registers well with clients. I noticed that registers well really with my upstream network, those professionals I've been purposely networking with. It strikes a chord, and I think it's something also really unique and different that many agents aren't doing. So you also are easy to remember.
And I think that that's extremely important, because the lesson there is that most of the speaking gigs that I've gotten, just like you have been things that we've been intentional about raising your hand and saying, I'm here, I'm ready. And you don't get every single one of them, but when you put that out there, a lot of people think that you have to be some part of some speakers guild or speakers bureau or have some crazy thing going on. And a lot of it is just volunteering, because more often than not, people are scared to speak or don't know what to say. And you just kind of have to get the gumption to say, I'm ready to speak and I'm ready to get out there. And I've had a couple of situations where I'm very, very friendly. I've created a good friendship with one of the editors for Realtor Magazine through 30 Under 30 and several other pieces, where they'll ping me every now and again and say, hey, we need an article. It's kind of like we're pressed up against a deadline. It's for YPN or it's for whatever. And can you help us? And I will say that each time I'm grateful after I do it. But when I groove into becoming a writer, for which is not my trained profession, all of a sudden you're pressed up against this deadline. You're like, it's this big national thing. There's a lot of like stress and anxiety that happens. You're like, how's it going to look? And are they going to like my ideas? And how's it going to be received? And every single time I say yes, even though there's certainly some times where I could easily have said no, because I'm like, there's just not going to fit in the schedule right now. And every single time I'm grateful for it. And the PR and the publicity and the extension that happens because of that is really, really special. So I agree with your concept there. And I love that. I had never heard that before. It makes total sense. Some of the best advice is the super obvious stuff, but experts do two things: they speak and they write. I love that. Absolutely love it. What was the name of that broker or that mentor that you were talking to?
Colleen Barry, she's our company CEO.
Oh, awesome. That's great. So I've got some other thoughts about just being in high-end sales. We do luxury real estate here at Calibrate Real Estate in Denver. We also sell we sell investment property, and our mission is we exist to help people create generational wealth through real estate. That's our mission at Calibrate. So when you're working with high-end net worth people who make high income, but also financial planners, CPAs, estate planners, what do you project? I mean, what's the things that you think about as far as, I mean, it can go down to what you wear, but certainly how you speak and where you're going out to dinner. And I think a lot of times people get this misconception of lifestyles of the rich and famous, Cribs, whatever show you want to talk about lately that talks about wealthy people. But what are some things that you do to really position yourself and say that, it sounds like obviously you were broke, you were working a government job when you first got started. You didn't come from wealth maybe. And you certainly weren't there when you started. So what did you do to maybe position yourself without faking it? Because I think that that's really important. I think that most of the people that I've met that either have some celebrity or gained some wealth, they have a pretty high, for lack of a better term, BS meter, and they have a pretty high threshold for understanding, probably in a more appropriate way, whether you are or not authentic.
Sure. So some of the best advice, again, I got from the same mentor who I partnered with that listing with. He told me something. He goes, most agents don't succeed in the luxury market because they're afraid of it. They hear the price points, they see the numbers, and they're afraid to even be anywhere near it. And so that really registered. And so something I made a point to do was really just to hit as many brokers open of the luxury market as possible, to not be intimidated by it, to go to all the open houses, see the properties, see the price points, and just learn the market. And I am a firm believer that you can be an expert in any market and any price point, even if you've never sold in that market or price point. The job is the same. If you learn the inventory, you learn the sales stats, you're positioning yourself that when you do have that opportunity, you're not faking it. You really do know the market. And so my first high-end buyer actually came in through my website from my blogging. And she was from Turkey, and she was looking up to, I think, 1.6 in Back Bay. And I did not give up on this lead. This lead was an online lead. I was working for 6 months. She ignored every one of my emails every time I sent her a property. And then one day she wrote back, I would love to see that tomorrow at 12. And I was super nervous because I was like, oh my God, the most expensive property I think at that point I'd ever sold was probably like 400,000. But I had been learning the market purposely in that 6 months. I had nothing but time to do that. So my first meeting with her, of course, I was, dressed to the nines, but I also had every single piece of market data specific to that property. I came with a nice folder. I had the show sheet, I had all the comps, and I was able to speak knowledgeably about what I thought the property was worth and why. And she never questioned me. She never questioned my experience level. She never asked how many homes did I sell in the neighborhood. I think the presentation I had put out there in person, especially with probably the presentation she had seen online through my website, it all made sense to her. It all fit. And I think that is, again, a part of online branding and how you're presenting yourself in person. I think the two work together. And I think that with your market knowledge, if you've done a good job learning the market, you're not faking anything, even if you never sold at that price point.
I love that. And that is absolutely true. Is pretty quick. You can research enough to become an expert. And most people, even if they've lived in a neighborhood for, high-end neighborhood for 20 years, they may feel like, okay, I've lived in this neighborhood way longer than you've even been in this industry. But if you're more on point with this is exactly what the stats are, this is what the days on the market are, this is exactly who's buying the type of houses. We've sold X amount of houses in this neighborhood, and I've talked to all the agents that have done that. Here's what it takes to sell a home. Here's what it takes to sell a high-end luxury condo. Whatever the inventory is, you can demonstrate and circumnavigate maybe some experience pretty quickly because you're manufacturing experience through statistics. And I think that's a key lesson for a lot of new agents, is that you don't really have to have transactional experience. You just have to have knowledge, and knowledge is out there. I mean, if you're plugged into the MLS and you're talking to other agents and you're going to broker opens and you're doing floor time and you're doing the gritty hard work that a lot of people don't want to do. Everybody wants to go to a closing. Everybody wants to do the marketing launch and have the high-end, cocktail party at this brand new sparkling listing, and works with a developer that they may get to sell 24 units in a new luxury condo building. But the hard work, the floor time, taking online leads, working buyers. I mean, there's a lot of people who are, it's almost like buyers are a pariah in our industry and they won't work with a buyer. Working with buyers does take a long time, but obviously it's fulfilling in the story of the client from Turkey. So I think that that's all great advice. All right. So what happens for a lot of successful people is they get there through a lot of mistakes. And I think that some people, when they haven't maybe experienced success, they get real bent out of shape when they make a mistake because they don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to recover from it. But I have learned that, again, successful people really are standing on a mountain of failure. So how have you learned to work through mistakes? Obviously, you've had some early success, but not everything goes your way. And I think it's important to speak to the person who may be down right now that isn't feeling like the world is necessarily working really well. Or I had a conversation the other day with someone who is a really, really strong producer, is a really, really intelligent, effective person in the real estate industry. And they were just saying, the market got a slow start this year. And I felt a little bit like that was an excuse. And so what I would say is that I think there's a mentality around how to persevere through whether it's objections or other mistakes that you could make. So how do you learn how to just kind of deal with that and move through it?
So one of my favorite books, and it's so elementary, it's like 100 pages, and it's like a kindergarten wrote it, is like called The Dip.
Oh
And
yeah, Seth Godin.
yeah,
Mhm.
I was reading that my first year, and it's just, it's the ups and downs of success, period, and how everything is a pattern. And it sounds so dumb, but basically one of the points of the book is, well, when you're down, there's really nowhere else to go but up. And I really do feel with this job that, you know, right when you feel like you just can't stand this job anymore because it's such an emotional roller coaster, that's always when things turn around. And I think perseverance over anything at the end of the day is key. I still have days where I'm just like, why do we do this? We get yelled at constantly, you lose money left and right, but then you make a lot of money left and right. Like it's just so, crazy. And I think just pushing through it and not caring. I think the hardest part about the job absolutely is the mental toughness. And you just have to, ignore it. And sometimes too, for me, that's even saying, I'm burnt out right now. I'm not going to work this week. That is the beauty of being your own boss. Yes, we don't make money when we do that, but sometimes you really do need that recharge or just to, hit the gym or get a massage or whatever it is that helps you just, change your mindset. Because I think that's the other half of the battle is that you just have to have a positive mindset always, even when everything's going to hell around you.
A nugget of wisdom that I really heard in your answer is something that I've experienced. My mentor, Matt, and this is years ago, over a decade ago, when I was just getting started making that transition from being an admin on his team to then being what a lot of people would call a buyer agent or junior associate or rookie broker. I was working on their team, calling on their listings, but also working on bringing in my own listings that we would share as a team and also working buyers and things of that sort. And I was really frustrated. I had a bad day. I don't remember what the circumstances were. And Matt said, "Hey, go home." And I was like, "What?" And I don't remember what time it was. It was probably 2 or 3 in the afternoon. He's like, "Get out of here." He's like, "You're not going to be real effective if you're calling people and you're all down and out. And, you might just need to get some perspective, go on a walk, go hang out with a friend, go on a jog, do whatever it is to clear your mind." And that was something that has stayed with me because I think sometimes people feel like, okay, and using it, maybe a gym analogy, I'm going to just grind it out and keep lifting weights and I'm going to get stronger. And it's like, no, sometimes you need to step back and recover. And a lot of times you need to take that week off. I remember there was a buddy of mine in college that was a big weightlifter and he would always have his down week. I forget what he called it, but he was like, you work out hard for 8 weeks or 10 weeks or whatever. And then there was a complete like recovery week where no working out at all. And then you go back into the grind again, just to give your body that recovery time. You think about the NFL, about football, they have a bye week and there's lots of time off in other sports. And I think that's really important. All right. So you touched on a few of those other tactical items where it was go get a massage or, go work out or, a lot of people talk to therapists. What are some of your go-to things that you're like, hey, I'm feeling like I'm in this struggle point. I'm between a rock and a hard place, or I'm dealing with a difficult deal. What are some of your 1, 2, 3 quick recovery things that are tangible for people to say, like, that's what I can do to get kind of outside my own head?
All right, they're all self-destructive, but if I want to answer completely honestly, I go onto my roof deck and I have a cigarette. I drink a martini and watch Netflix.
Like Don Draper.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, 100%. Or honestly, I sleep in. I get so excited when I have a morning where I sleep till 8 a.m. and I just feel like, I feel like I'm in college and I just slept till like 11 o'clock or something. And I'm just like so refreshed just from that one morning of getting a really good sleep.
Maybe that one morning is not after you had the martini and the cigarette, though. So, but I appreciate your honesty, because I think for a lot of people, everybody has a different thing. And the idea when someone's, freaking out or whatever is, hey, well, you need to eat salads or go, keto, or, do this, go on a juicing cleanse or whatever. And it's like, yeah, that's the last thing I want. I want to have a cheeseburger, or I want to have a double cheeseburger. And I just want to kind of like mope for a second. And I think as long as you embrace it and realize that, okay, that's a 1-day thing and then back at it, I think that's important. If you get on, a bender, that's where it becomes a little bit destructive. Okay, so online branding was one of the things we were talking about. Social media. What are some of your favorite platforms? What are things that you do that are repeatable, that are tangible, that we can talk to our audience about? That you say, hey, here's something that's really working for me. And just because you're not in Boston doesn't mean you can't implement this if you're in Austin, Texas, or Denver, Colorado, or Los Angeles, or Kalamazoo, Michigan. What are some things you're doing on social that are really fun for you?
So primarily, I'm just posting my sales and I'm posting opportunities like this to leverage myself as an expert. What I find with sales is you have 2 opportunities for every sale, which sort of inflates your selling. I do on the buyer side, I always do an offer accepted post where I show pictures of the house. And then on closing day, I always do a just sold with my clients in front of the house. People don't realize that's the same transaction twice. It's just you're selling. So you're staying in everyone's face that way. And it's just creating, again, that momentum of, wow, Ryan's having a really good year. And I cannot go to a single party or any event without someone wanting to talk about real estate with me, or them saying, I just saw that house you posted. It was unbelievable. And same with listings. I always do a just listed and I always do a just sold. And I always say too, tell the story of the sale. We all know how hard this business is. We all know the turmoil we go through to close a deal. Why not share that? So for example, when it's a bidding war situation, I'll say it, offer accepted. We just outbid 3 offers. Offer accepted. We avoided competition by going to the broker's open house and got in before the first public open house and submitted our offer that night. I literally say exactly how I won, and I share my strategies. And I have a lot of people, especially buyers, with how competitive the market has been, who will reach out to me changing agents, and they'll say, I just don't feel like my agent's as aggressive as you are. I see what you're doing to get your buyers a deal. If I find something off market, they'll say that. I saw you do a lot off market. Do you have anything we can get into? And not that I'm actively trying to steal someone else's client. Like, I do feel a little guilty doing that, but if you can show your value and you can show that they should be hiring you, then I think, it is what it is. You just take the business.
That's brilliant advice. It's really simple to understand, but I will say, because I do the same, it is very difficult to implement. And the reason why it's difficult is because it takes a lot of consistency. And I think there's a lot of things in life where someone can get on a new workout fad, someone can get on a new health kick, diet, whatever you want to call it. And they'll do that for a week, maybe 10 days, and then they'll fall off and go back to their kind of normal or homeostasis habits, the things that feel comfortable, that feel normal. So I think for you, I completely agree. What I think is really unfortunate, and I'll see it in my industry, I'll see it in our own business, is that someone gets a listing, they market the heck out of it, and especially if it goes under contract very quickly, it'll be 30, 45, maybe sometimes even 60 days until anybody will hear anything else about it again. And so you have that, you worked so hard to get that listing, it went under contract in a hot second, and then now no one hears about it until it closes. So you can be marketing when you go under contract. You can then be marketing again when you pass inspection, when you pass appraisal. And it's like you can get 4 or 5 hits on one listing. And then, of course, when you sell it, you can get that out there. And you can also send it out 6 months later, by the way. Most people, that's the thing I think is so funny, is a lot of agents think that there's like a shelf life. And I realize you don't want to be deceitful with your marketing, but if you sell something and put it out there and it's in April, don't you think that when the market slowed down in June or July, you could probably send that out and the pricing's not going to be too far off and just say, hey, we closed this deal, and it becomes a reminder thing. And I don't even think you need to say anything about, it's a throwback Thursday type of thing. It's just, hey, this is a deal we sold. And a lot of people may have missed that when you first sent it out. Um, I think the statistics on our email marketing is something like 30 or 40% of the list that we send to even opens an email. And it's not because they don't like us, it's just because it either gets caught in spam or they move on to the next thing or they delete it, just because they just happen to delete it that day. So I think people are so reserved in the idea that they only have one shot to market a listing. It's like you should be able to create multiple connections on that. And that should beget more business, which I think you're doing really, really effectively. What are some other strategies that you like to do on social media? Obviously, we talked about Facebook. Are you into Instagram, Twitter? What are some of the things that you like to do on those social platforms?
So I think even showings. I think showings are a great way of being active, especially for a brand new agent. If you
It's a
don't have
great point.
listings, but you're showing stuff, show what you're showing. I love stories for that on Facebook and Instagram. Even yesterday, I was down in a town I don't normally sell in, but at a really good price point. So I wanted to showcase that just to remind people that I will go here for the right price. And so, I posted a video of this unbelievable home for 1.3 on Instagram as a story. And then I was loving it because I'm so used to city prices where 1.3 gets you nothing. That I was in this mansion for 1.3. I was like, this feels like 1.3. This is incredible. And a lot of people responded to it. Even someone who grew up in Norway was like, oh, my parents are selling their house. It just led to a potential opportunity. Is it a strong enough connection that I think I'll get the listing? Probably not, but at least I now know, of a lead to chase down. And you just never know what it might shake up just by doing something that simple that people, engage with you and respond, and just it might lead to some kind of opportunity.
Yeah, I love all of that because it's so true. The thought process, and you had said it in the beginning, is, I'm marketing my sales. You don't have to have sales to market yourself in real estate. If you're going to broker opens like you were in the past, really, really aggressively learning the market, post that because people know that you're interested and it's interesting for people to have access to real estate. Most people forget, most realtors forget, I should say, that the general public doesn't have access to real estate like we do. They don't know about all the broker opens. They certainly don't have the ability to call a showing desk and get a lockbox code to go preview a brand new listing. And I think that all of that it's free. It just takes some time. And then you do it on, like you said, on a story so that it's not like out there forever. And I think that that's great. I think it's really, really tactical, very practical advice. So I love that. That's very, very good stuff. All right. So one of the last questions that I ask all of our guests is this concept of Dear Younger Me. It's a presentation I've done. It's actually a song that's been out for a couple of years. And the concept is, you've had some success, you're 30 or you're 40 or you're 50, whatever age you are, and you're looking back and you're writing a letter to that 22-year-old version of yourself. I like to coin this as it's the advice you wish you knew when you were 22. So if you're writing a letter to yourself, or if you're now that senior broker that's interacting with someone new in the business, which might be more practical, that happens on a regular basis now, what advice would you give to someone in their early 20s that's getting started in real estate?
For me, I would say, watch out for burnout. It's just so easy. I think when you first get started, this job, if you let it, will absolutely take over your entire life, which isn't a horrible thing if you truly love it. And I do truly love it. But I did realize, I went through a phase where I was just like, I'm not taking care of myself. I gained 30 pounds in the first 2 years because I was living off fast food. And funny enough, about a year and a half ago, it was around November, and I was going into the new year, saying, I'm taking a step back. I'm focusing on me. I'm going to hire a trainer. I'm going to get in shape again. And I'm going to treat my training schedule like an actual showing, like an appointment. And ironically, I had my best year yet. And I think it's taking care of yourself. I think it changes your mindset. I think for me, getting back into shape, you raised my confidence level. I think it made me just in general a better mindset. It got me to the office even more, just because I was getting up 8 to get to the gym by 8. And then from the gym I'd go straight to the office. I had nothing else to do. I think it's funny how I think if you're not taking care of yourself, it totally translates into the business. Even if you think you're doing the right thing by just constantly grinding it out. But I think the burnout factor can have such an impact on your business without you even realizing it. And just making sure that you're not losing sight of, taking care of yourself, whether it's, spending more time with your family, whether it's, staying healthy, staying active, just finding your you time to recharge. Because I think, again, that mental toughness, I think you have to be able to persevere when things are awful, that if you aren't taking proper care, that's probably going to be harder to do.
I think that's really important, the concept of burnout. And I will admit that early in my career, someone said to me, and I can't remember who it was, and that doesn't necessarily matter. When I was sharing that I was in real estate, they said, that's a really stressful business. That's a really stressful industry. And I looked at them kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, it's not stressful. And it's really funny because I think that I became so accustomed to the craziness that I didn't step back for a second and realize just how all encompassing it could be. And as a high performer and as a hard worker, I mean, I got into the office at 5. We're 2 hours different for our podcast audience. So, Ryan's on the East Coast. We're trying to get this done before he goes out and does showings and has appointments. And I said, hey, I've got no problem with coming in early. And so I was in here at 5 to do this, which is kind of a volunteer type of thing. We're not paid to do this podcast. And we certainly, we don't have sponsors or anything like that. So this is something that I do for fun. And I remember early in my career, I would get into the office at 4:30 or 5, not because I enjoyed it. It was kind of by necessity. Our firstborn was a little baby, and she would get up around 4 o'clock when she was an infant, and I would take that feeding and I'd change her, and then I'd be up. I'm like, it's 4:15. I'm like, might as well go shower and go into the office. And I was so productive that year. One, because I had a very powerful purpose and a very powerful why. I had, my wife and I had our firstborn, Charlotte, and then you also had like, hey, this is time that everybody else is sleeping, and I can be effective here. So I think burnout is something that a lot of people kind of say, oh, that won't happen to me, or that's for people that are weak-minded, but it's going to happen. And burnout is just it's just a being overcome by stress and not having the proper releases for it. And so a great tool for anybody, and you can certainly offer some advice here, Ryan, as well, is I'm reading a book called High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard, where he actually goes through some very specific, and it's like 350 pages. I'm almost finished with the book. But Brendon, in an interview, had mentioned that it actually was probably more like 3 books before they condensed it down. At some point, I think it was like 1,400 pages his manuscript was, and he had to continue to edit and condense. But the whole point is he has been very successful working with high performers, celebrities, high achievers, and how they deal with the constant demands. And as you're leveling up, there's the concept of new levels, new devils. And it just is incredible because there's higher stresses as you hit each level. And how do you deal with it? How do you not bury it, but how do you actually breathe through it? How do you, and it goes through all these different practices. So I don't want to give away the book. I want to make sure people actually see it. But what are some things that you do to deal with burnout? Because I think that we talked about this a little bit earlier, but when you really feel like, hey, I am totally burned out, what are some things that you do where you're like, this is, or for that agent that you're talking to that you say, hey, this is how you take care of yourself?
I personally love routines. I think it's so important to have some kind of consistency, especially in this job where there is no consistency. We run around every day. Every day is completely different, which is what makes it exciting, but it's also what makes it exhausting. That was something I really had to work on, especially this past year. This was my turning point of realizing that, it's my 3rd year full time now. And I was like, I need to change some stuff. And so for me, it was creating the routine and my workout schedule. I work out at the exact same times, on the exact same days a week. My dog, we get up at the same time every morning. We go to the dog park every morning at 4 o'clock. I go to the dog park every single day. It doesn't matter what my schedule is. Somehow I'm at the dog park every single day at 4 o'clock. For the most part, I mean, it changes a little bit, but those are those little small moments of me of just, and I might be on the phone the entire time at the dog park, but I'm there. Being outside, being around people, seeing a bunch of cute dogs just puts me in a better mood. And just having those little moments of just, this is my schedule, and I think that's so hard to do in this job. And, it sounds so easy to do, but it's surprisingly really hard. And I think just making a point to put those things into your calendar and you work around them and you say no matter what. There's an agent I love who he's so blunt, and it cracks me up. He goes, I don't work Mondays. And he says that to everyone he meets. He's like, I do not work Mondays. And so his clients know it, his attorneys know it, his lenders, other agents know it. And it's annoying because you're like, oh, God damn it. That's the only day they can see the property. But you'd be like, he won't show it because it's Monday. But it's just, I respect it, and that was one of the things that made me say, I need to do that for myself too. And I think you have to find, obviously what works for you. And I think even learning too, I'm still very driven. I still want to do as good as I possibly can. But I think even saying to yourself, this is a build year. This isn't a build year. Knowing what years you're going to go, balls to the wall to try and be as successful as possible, and what years you're going to say, this is kind of a recharge. I had a great year. I'm happy with what I did. Next year I'm going to really go on, looking to expand my team and all that. But for now, let's just cruise, and I think trying to get to the finish line right away isn't always necessarily the best approach, especially if you plan on being in the business for 30 to 40 years. Not that I've gotten lazy, but I feel like, it's okay to take a step back and breathe and just say, this is what I need to do for me.
Yeah, I think that's incredibly important. You've got to pace yourself, especially since this is something that's going to be, like you said, a career for decades for a lot of people. The thing I like you sharing about the dog park is that we all have, and I think of the old movie Happy Gilmore with Adam Sandler, where everybody goes to their happy place, right? And for a guy that I know, it's the car wash. And he had described that he loves making, and it's not like a car freak or anything like that, but he loves his car being clean. And this particular car wash is a ride through car wash. And he had described it, and I could literally picture it. It was so personified, where he said, as I'm driving through, the car is getting washed, is all the suds over it. I'm like this in this cocoon of noise, first of all, and it's kind of soothing, but he's like, I know that everything from the day is washing off, literally from the car, but also from me. And he's like, I do that before I go home because it's a great spot for me to be like, okay, I'm done with work. Car's clean on the outside. In Denver, we get a lot of like rain and crazy stuff that will just happen a lot. And Denver's one of the like biggest car wash cities in America. So for us, you're constantly cleaning your car because you got all these crazy different weather patterns that come through. And for him, he was just feeling like, that's my happy place. For you, it's the dog park. My dog Boomer and I, we go and we walk in the open space, which is literally 1 block from our house. We've got this beautiful open space. We've even created an Instagram account for Boomer because it's like he's constantly doing all this stuff with me on my run. And you just have those happy places. It could be coffee with a good friend once a week. It could be whatever it is, but you've got to find those little disconnect moments where you're like, I can just be me. I can have this moment where I can just kind of de-stress. And I will say, and I will absolutely sell therapy. There's a psychologist in our building that I office in that I have been going to for about 1.5 years now. It's not all that regular. It's once every month and a half, but I am like on top of the world. I talk to my wife afterwards and she's like, every single time you go to therapy, it's like great. And it's not this like depressing thing. It's like sharing what's going on. And this happened, or I had this negotiation that didn't go the way I thought it was. And where was my role in that negotiation? And I think it's really, really important stuff. So I appreciate all your advice, especially about burnout and sustaining ourselves in the business. So I just really, really appreciate all of that. One of the things I wanted to remind all of our subscribers and our listeners, we're on YouTube, so you can see Ryan and I together. We're also on iTunes if you want to listen in as you're getting that walk with your dog or you're commuting to work. And Ryan Glass, I just really appreciate you. I appreciate your wisdom, our friendship. I feel like we've got a good kindred spirit. We've got some good energy. And I really appreciate your time today on our podcast. So as I love to say, for Ryan Glass, our esteemed guest, for our podcast producer, Kayla Davis, I'm Kyle Malnati, and we will see you around the neighborhood. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.